Mambition.
I love it. Mambition, hello everybody.
Hello and welcome back to Mambition.
It's Alex.
And Tiffany. And Alison. Exactly. Alison, welcome to Mambition. I'm just going to tell you guys a little bit more about Alison. So, Alison Dunn is the CEO of the Society's Matters Group, where she's transformed a charity from near insolvency to a thriving organization with over 230 employees, championing communities across the Northeast. She's a passionate advocate for social justice. She's been recognized as Business Leader of the Year for 24. She's a Charity Leader of the Year 2023 and Leveling Up Leader 2024. But her journey to the top wasn't always straightforward. She left school at 16 with no qualifications. And today, she is using her voice and platform to break down barriers and create a fairer society for all. Welcome to Mambition.
Ladies, thanks so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to chatting to you.
Yeah, us too.
Yeah. I think it's nice to have a voice from the Northeast. And actually, you're also a mum, right? How many?
Oh, yes, I'm a mum and I'm a grandmother. I've got 3 children and I've got a grandson who's 8.
Wow, you are very busy then.
I am indeed.
I think what I mentioned there about, sort of the journey from, 16 to where you are today is clearly remarkable. And I think that's a great place to start in terms of, I remember when we spoke, you said someone made a comment about your future a while ago about, maybe you becoming a secretary.
Yeah.
Was it one of your teachers?
No, it was it was a person in the street actually. So I remember as a child. Now, obviously, I'm going to give my age away here. I'm a child of the 70s, and it wasn't unusual at that time for you to get stopped in the street by little old ladies who would ruffle your hair and say, "What is it you're going to do when you grow up?" And I distinctly remember my mother saying that I was going to be a secretary until I got married. The implication of that being that once I was married, I would stay at home and have my children. And I just remember thinking, oh, I'm going to be a secretary and then I'm going to get married. And that set the trajectory for my school life. And actually, you might think to yourself, hearing this through the 21st century lens, that was my mother limiting me. But actually, my mother was a post-war baby, and to be a secretary and in paid work as a post-war
It's like a high
baby,
aspiration.
it was a really high aspiration. So to her, she was really setting a high bar for me. I didn't know any different. So that was the journey that I took. And I was the sort of kid at school, I went fairly unnoticed. I wasn't a troublemaker. I wasn't a goody-goody. I just sort of went through, turned up every day, did my thing, didn't particularly enjoy school. It didn't really enlighten any passions in me. It came and it went. And then I thought, well, I need a job. Mm-hmm. So I started to look around for a job, and I landed a job as an office junior in a firm of solicitors. And that was the moment that changed everything for me, because I remember a feeling of physical anger and frustration that the people that were in that organisation were no different to me. And that had been entirely invisible to me. I had never imagined that I might do that. I'd always assumed that they would all be privately educated, that they would be from Cambridge or Oxford or had gone to boarding school, and actually they were just ordinary folk. And I thought, well, that was a surprise. You've got a choice now. You can continue to be the secretary here, or you can do something about it. So that was in the May. In the September, I enrolled myself in night school, which again might be quite an old-fashioned term, but got my GCSEs, got my A-levels, and persuaded that firm to put me through Open University, and I qualified as a lawyer.
Wow.
It's an amazing story. And I think you made me think a little bit of Michelle Obama there.
When she's a personal hero of mine, so I'm going to take that.
Nice to be compared to Michelle Obama, always. But what made me think of her was that quote that she's got about, I've been at the kind of the highest tables, and the people there aren't all that.
Yeah.
And I think that really sounds like what you discovered of like, hang on, actually, these people aren't like special.
No, just normal. Yeah.
There's no reason I can't do it if they can.
Yeah. And, it just had never been made visible to me that any of that was possible. And of course, once it was, well, I was off. And you know, one of the things that's been consistent throughout my life is tenacity. I'm very tenacious. Once I get the bit between my teeth, if you tell me that I can't do something, the likelihood is I'm pretty much going to do it then.
I love that sort of energy, and I think it's actually quite underrated. I often think about how the most remarkable things in our lives are always usually a result of being pushed to do something. I don't think we do things when it's comfortable, it's nice, so I want to do it. I think there's always this pain. Even starting Ambition for us, it was like we both had quite negative experiences from our lives. I made us think, okay, we need to do more with motherhood and not just settle.
Yeah. And, you know, I brought 3 kids up while I was doing all of this, and none of that was easy because I was in private practice during the 90s when being a working female in a occupation like that was incredibly difficult, actually. There was very little provision for my family life. And in fact, in one of the firms that I worked where it was a particularly brutal culture, you simply weren't allowed to mention even that you had children. There was no conversation around, you know, no possibility of having a day off to go to a school fair or to attend a nativity play. You simply didn't mention your children. You came in, you went to work, and that was it. So it was a very, very tough time to be bringing up children. There was a lot of personal sacrifice, a lot of toing and froing of the children between myself and my husband, who was also trying to build his career at that time. It was a hard decade for sure.
And so how did you manage that with raising the kids? Like how did you actually do it?
I mean, I'll be honest, I was probably in a perpetual state of either exhaustion or filled with adrenaline. You know, that feeling of just always running on empty, but running fast. We had to pay for childcare, private childcare, because I absolutely couldn't have a day where a childminder wasn't available to me. We did try childminders. That would have been my preference. But in the end, we had to go with paid nursery because we needed the security of knowing that there would always be someone there. But what used to happen is I would come home about 4 o'clock, 4:30 to get the children from childcare, get them their meals, get them settled for bed. Then when my husband came in from work about 6:30, I would go back to the office.
Oh, wow.
And I would work on an evening and come home most nights about sort of 10, 11 o'clock, and then it would start again. I also worked every Sunday afternoon as well. So my red line was Saturdays. I never worked on a Saturday, but I was always in the office on a Sunday afternoon. So there was a lot of us sort of tag teaming for the children, and not a lot of opportunity for us to be together as a family.
And then that like hyper masculine environment to be in. I'm thinking of This Life. Did you watch that back in the 90s?
Yeah.
I'm thinking of that, and the always on the clock and having to prove yourself and be the same as the men.
Yeah.
It sounds like a really tough environment to be in.
It was incredibly tough. And I remember one time that I was only supposed to be working a half day, and I was in the magistrate's court, and the case had been rolled over. It was a criminal case, and I only had my child in nursery for the morning, and I rang the office and said, you know, this case has been rolled over. You're going to have to send somebody else. I've got to leave. And my male boss at the time said to me, you've got 2 choices. You stay there and you finish the case, or you go and pick your child up, but don't bother coming back to work tomorrow.
Oh my God.
Wow.
And to my shame, I stayed.
Yeah.
And why did I do that? I did that for a couple of reasons. I think despite what I said earlier about, you know, if you can be it, if you can see it, you can be it, I still had a little bit of a feeling that I didn't deserve to be there. And therefore I was really determined to keep a hold of that job. There was a little bit of me felt that perhaps I wasn't as good as some of the others. So I really wanted to prove myself and to work hard. And a little bit of worry that if I didn't have my job, that I wouldn't, you know, that I wouldn't get a reference, that I wouldn't be employed again. But also I was young, I was really ambitious. If that same conversation was to happen now with the, you know, the passage of time and the wisdom that I've gained over the years, I absolutely wouldn't have responded to it in that way. But I've also made it my personal ambition to ensure that anybody who works for me doesn't have that experience.
It's interesting, isn't it? Just how we, I suppose, our experiences and how they shape us, or how
Yeah,
they sort of light a fire under us to kind of change something.
yeah,
But I think you also make an interesting point about that success trap.
yeah.
The ideas of kind of staying on the, I don't know if it's the hamster wheel almost, because you don't want to get off, because it's your identity. You've always worked, right? You've always been creative, and you've paid the price to be there. But also, obviously, you want to be a mother, you want to try and balance everything. But also, how I think you mentioned in our initial conversation, how you felt like you had to adopt sort of male characteristics to
Oh,
succeed
I
in
was
law.
the epitome of the
Yeah.
90s bitch, which was, the stereotype that was going around at the time. I had the power suit, I had the Mercedes, I had the fancy holidays. I mean, I was absolutely like in my stride. And when I was in it, I felt like I really loved it.
Yeah.
Um, I didn't have any. I was exhausted and it was hard work, but I definitely wasn't unhappy. I liked the work. I liked the
Of
people that
course.
I worked with. I liked the lifestyle that it gave me. But when I look back on it now, it definitely came at a price.
And I
Wow.
think interesting as well when you're talking about like the choices you would make now would be different, but I think that there's still an element for women coming back from maternity leave and things like that you still feel like you've got to prove how committed you are.
Well, Alex, I mean, we know for a fact, don't we, that women lose about 7 years of progression actually when they take that year off.
Yeah.
And many, their careers often don't recover. They they take part-time work and therefore they're overlooked for promotion. I mean, it is a real challenge and it hasn't changed in that respect. I mean, when I had my second child, he was actually born on Boxing Day. And the very next day, which was a ordinary working day, my boss was on the phone wanting to know when I was going back to work.
My God.
That's
Unbelievable, really. I feel like now you would possibly have people be less blatant about that
Yeah.
kind of pressure that
Yeah.
they'd put on mothers. But I think because women still know that this discrimination happens, because they know the impact on their careers, they come back and they're desperate to try and prove themselves, that then leads to burnout and
Yeah.
unhappiness. And, I feel like it just happens in a, the boss might not ring them the day after they've had a baby to ask when they'll be back, because that
Yeah.
would probably be seen as a bridge too far these days.
Well, and rightly so, and I'm glad about it. But we still put a lot of pressure on ourselves, don't we?
yeah.
The media tells us that we should be able to work, that we should be able to be great moms, that there should be a perfect meal on the table every day. Our houses should be sparkling.
And just bounce back.
But we know that 75% of the care that happens in the home is done by women
Yeah.
still.
Yeah. It's I think we even saw that, is it women, compared to like the 1950s, we still spend as much time as women then spent with their children. It's just that obviously now our time is split probably equally, or not equally,
Yeah.
across work and children.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I look at you, Alison. I always think life goes in chapters. Sometimes we just have to do life in a certain way to then move into another chapter, to
Yeah.
then sort of learn something or do it differently. And I love the fact that you almost had like an awakening, right, where you sort of transitioned to the citizen's advice. And I love to hear how that sort of happened for you.
Yeah, and I suppose it's not a dissimilar story to the first one, actually. So I talked in there about, being 16 and having my eyes opened. And the same thing happened when I moved into the charity sector. So after I had my third child, it was just too difficult to go back into private practice. So I decided that I would take a year out, but I did always intend to go back because, why would I not? I'd had a great career. I had all of the things that I wanted. But about 6 months into the year off, I started to feel a little bit isolated. So I decided that I would look for some part-time work. And I thought, well, what do I want to do? I'm going to go back to work eventually. I'll look for something in the charitable sector where I can use my skills. I'm probably not going to get paid as well, but it's okay. I'll just, I'll give something back for a year. And I got a job 2 days a week at Citizens Advice. And it was like the scales dropped from my eyes when I walked into that organisation. I was overqualified for the job, but in some ways I was completely underqualified as well. So I remember one of my very first clients that came to see me when I was in Citizens Advice, and he talked to me about what was going on in his life. He had been released from prison. He'd been the victim of child abuse, sexual abuse. He couldn't read and write. He was in a spiral of debt. There was all sorts of things happening to him. And despite him telling me that he couldn't read and write and he was going through all of this, I wrote him a 16-page report on how he was going to turn his life around. And then, because that's what I did, I told people how to turn their lives around, and they absolutely listened to me, and they went away and they did that stuff, and then they came back and their lives were great. So when he came back a month later and he hadn't done any of the things that I told him he needed to do, I was really surprised.
But I gave you the information. Why are you not acting on it?
Yeah, but
Oh,
obviously in time I realised that there are a number of reasons why people can't do the things that you need them to do. And there are reasons why people might shoplift. And there are reasons why people might be the perpetrator of domestic violence because they themselves have experienced adverse childhood experiences. Now, I'm not excusing that, but there are reasons why people end up in situations that they do. And in all of the time that I had been in private practice, both when I was studying academically, but also in the practice of the law, nobody had ever talked to me about the social determinants of health, about why somebody might have shoplifted, about poverty, about inequality, about disadvantage, about social or inclusion or exclusion. And Citizens Advice opened up this whole other world for me. And once I'd seen that, there was no going back. So it was another one of those moments in my life where I had an experience of something that wasn't visible to me that I could have just chosen to ignore, but actually I opened my mind to it and it resulted in a complete pivot. So those 2 days a week became 3 days, became 4 days, became 5 days, became the supervisor, became the service manager, became the contract manager, and then the CEO. So within 5 or 6 years, I'd gone from only intending to spend a summer there to being the CEO of the organisation. But in doing all of that, there was a complete reprogramming of everything that I believed in. So, I made a joke earlier about being the epitome of the 90s sort of super bitch. Well, I'm now walking around in sandals, waving candles about,
I'm joking. It's funny because sort of sidetrack. I was watching First Dates the other day. I love First Dates, by the way.
Oh, it's a great movie.
I don't know if I can admit that, but it was just this honestly, people are so fascinating. This girl had she'd sort of she lives in a temp. She's completely changed her life. She now is like a Christian, follows like the Christian religion. She was saying how she doesn't eat anything that it doesn't eat anything that sort of obviously no meat or anything like that, but she would pray into her food. But this is someone who's completely grown up in like a very, very Western society and just completely adopt the whole like obviously Christian religion. And she said she used to work. She had a successful marketing career. She was so driven. She had made lots of money, and she just suddenly gave it all up. And obviously, she was saying how now she's a lot more at peace. And I think it's really interesting just how we can change as people. And I think that's something, especially as a mum, I'm always kind of looking at my children and kind of thinking about how I can not label them or try not to label them so that they can have that sort of space to change if they wish to. Because I just think we're not fixed, right? Someone who's calm could have another side to them. And I just think it's always important to, especially mothers, sort of give our children the freedom to sort of change and adapt and evolve. And I just really think it is really fascinating how we can look back at who we used to be and think, like, I'm not that person anymore.
Yeah, I say to my kids all of the time, people aren't one thing. Somebody can present as being really lovely and very plausible and have a dark side, but actually some people do really bad things. And I know that more than most because of my previous involvement in the legal profession, and they can still be a niceness to them. I mean, I came across some pretty dark people that had done some pretty terrible things, but I can't tell you that there wasn't elements of them that were charming and charismatic and funny and all of that. We're not one thing. And and the ability to be able to open our minds to that, to be able to pivot and to take a new direction of travel.
And not be put in a box as well of like, I've always done it like this, so I have to continue. You can reflect. And that must have been a really interesting journey to go on, of like going there to sort of give back for a little bit. And then, I mean, you must have kind of fallen in love with it to stay and do that, Alison.
Absolutely fallen in love with it, but it completely reprogrammed everything that I believed about myself and the world as well. And so there was moments of discomfort. So, you know, I became politically very different, much more active, politically and socially. So that put strains on relationships that had known me as this sort of very powerful lawyer running around town. Everything that I believed was different. How I saw the world was different. How I saw relationships was different. How I was prepared to interact with people was different. What I wanted out of life became quite different. So it has been a really positive experience, but it's also been uncomfortable at times, as much for people around me as for me, actually, because, you know, my husband married one person and he's got somebody else now.
And in terms, you talked about always being ambitious. And so has that continued through your life? You'd still say you're ambitious, but your ambition has changed? Would that be fair to say?
It's funny to say I've always been ambitious and then to be telling you that I went to school and sort of left with no qualifications. I suppose it depends what you mean by ambitious. So I've always loved learning. I've always been curious and I've always loved people.
Okay.
And I always want, if something's important to me, and I think that's the difference, school wasn't actually important to me. When something's important to me, I want to do the best that I possibly can at it. So when I joined the Citizens Advice Service, when I became the CEO, the organisation was in a state of disarray. It was on the brink of insolvency. I had a High Court bailiff in reception on my very first day in the job. Right. Which would have been intimidating to a lot of people, but thankfully for me, I'd worked in an insolvency practice for a couple of years, so I wasn't as upset by that as others would have been. But having taken on the leadership of that organisation, I really wanted to do a good job, and I've grown it from 800,030 staff to a £7.4 million organisation with 265 staff. We've been a great place to work for 4 consecutive years, and for 3 of those years we've been a great place for women, and that's something that I'm particularly proud of. So ambitious for the organisation, ambitious for the people in it, and absolutely wanting to do the best for it and for the people that we serve. But it's a different type of ambition to the ambition that I had when I was in private practice, which was much more about my personal ambition and the personal rewards of that.
I like what you said there, because I think it's a nod in the direction of, you know, a mother who's listening, and it's always seen herself to be ambition in one version, but motherhood changes that. I mean, even for me, you know, sometimes I think the pre-motherhood version of me must look at me like, oh, are you okay there? Like, I'm so good to be the mom. And there's so many things I would give up my career for the children. Like, I genuinely just want to be there for them and, you know, be the mom that they need. And work is now like my second thing. But I would never thought that would be possible in any world. But I see now that motherhood in itself, it's a very worthy pursuit. It's something I want to throw myself into, but it's also in the pockets of time outside of it. I want to have a career. I want to have my own thing going on. So I think what you said there is hopefully inspiring for other women who are listening to this, who perhaps have changed, to accept that they've changed and then find a way to move forward with their version of ambition.
You've hit the nail right on the head. I hadn't necessarily thought about it like that, Tiffany, but you're absolutely right. Accepting that you've changed and carving out a different way. You know, I still have all of the lovely things that I had, thankfully. You know, it's a different type of ambition, but it's still delivered a really good life for me and my family, for sure. And motherhood does change you, and you can't imagine as you've just described there, that you would give up everything for your children, but you have a child, you love it, a second one comes along and you wonder how you could possibly love the second one as much as you do the first, but you do. Then the third one comes along and you think, do I really have it in me to love this third one as much as I love the first one and the second one? And guess what? Surprise, you do. And then years later, this grandchild comes along and you think, surely I haven't got anything left in me. And actually, probably, the relationship that I have with him has just been a complete joy, and I know now there's room for more.
Yeah. I mean, I know this is something that also we spoke about, sort of grandmotherhood. I think it'd be incredible to hear more about that, just because I think you've obviously, it must be an interesting perspective to have been a mother and then been a grandmother. I think
it's so much better being a grandmother.
Yeah, I can imagine handing back. Here you go. Thank you very much.
All those little memes that you see on Instagram and Facebook where the grandmother's like, sneaking them sugar under the all of that's happening in this household. Like he stays up beyond his bedtime and all of that. Yeah.
It's your prerogative by the time you're a grandparent, I think.
I'm totally sabotaging all of my daughter's good work.
Yeah, that's what all grandparents do as well. So yeah, I feel it.
Yeah, but it's been an interesting experience being a grandmother for me because my grandson is profoundly autistic.
Okay.
And up until very recently would have been described as non-verbal. So he's only just below his 8 started to find speech.
Okay.
There are some learning challenges in there. And so I've also had to learn how to be a good grandmother to a child who's non-speaking, who had some real behavioural challenges, to include some self-harming, which is a most distressing thing to witness. So that's been an interesting journey. He also, despite being non-verbal and having very few words, swears like a merchant sailor. So that's been something that I've had to get used to as well.
Yeah.
That sounds like a really interesting journey and probably not what you'd anticipated about being a grandparent. And how has that sort of challenged your expectations?
I mean, how has that challenged my expectations? When I have my grandson, it's absolutely not possible for me to be anything other than his grandmother for absolutely 100% of the time that I am with him. You can't take your eye off him for a second. And it might be hard for your listeners to understand the extent of that, but he has to come to the toilet with me. I can't go in the shower and leave him in a different room. He literally is glued to me. But also, learning to communicate with somebody who is non-speaking. Actually, you might think that was really hard, but it was really easy. We can't have long conversations the way that I might have done with my children were little, but we still manage to laugh together, to share humour, to share sadness, to share happiness, I know what he likes, he knows what I like. He has developed quite late in his sort of little childhood, but he's developed a love of books. So we share that interest together. We build Lego together. He loves Disney movies. So, I know the scripts of several Disney movies. It's not enough.
What's his favourite?
Yeah. Well, it changes from time to time.
Okay.
But right now, he's very, very into Encanto.
Okay.
And he also likes Up, which I think is a very depressing Disney movie.
I love Up, but I cry at it every time.
Yeah, I find that really depressing, but he really likes that one as well.
Yeah.
I once had to leave the room because I was like too emotional watching it at my parents. I was like, I borrowed it from a friend back when you got DVDs off people. Yeah. And I'd already watched it myself, and I brought it, and I was like, "Oh, you really love this?" to my parents. Put it on, but I had to leave the room before the sad bit because I was like, "I'm going to be an emotional wreck."
One of the things that he does is he has a condition, and I'm not going to try and say it on air because it's a really difficult word, but his speech comes from repeating things that he hears others say.
I've seen this word written down. It starts like echo.
Yes, yeah.
Something.
Shall I give it a go? Something like epileptic speech.
Okay.
I'm sure I'm not saying that right. But so he will communicate with little monologues that he's picked up from Disney movies. So if I tell him off for doing something and he feels that there's an injustice befallen him, he will call me a dastardly coward, which he has a little monologue which comes from the Black Cauldron Disney movie.
Oh, that's a
I
classic.
like
Oh,
that
it's
bit.
a classic, yeah. So I get a dastardly coward monologue, which is his way of telling me that he thinks that my telling him off is unfair. But he has little monologues in which he's sharing sort of emotion and letting me know that he loves me and he's here and stuff. So it's really different. It's really different.
Yeah, I think it's
There
oh,
are
sorry,
things that I miss as well, though. It's
pardon, say
not.
that again.
There are some things that I miss. So I
Yeah.
don't think about it until I'm out and I see somebody at my age with a grandchild the same age as him and they're having a very different experience.
Yeah.
That can be really tough sometimes. I don't think about it when we're in the house and it's just him and me and we're having a great time and it's lovely, but sometimes when I see how others are experiencing it, it's hard not to feel a little bit of grief and sadness for that.
Yeah. But I definitely think parenting in any sort of context, right, like parent or mother or grandparenting, I definitely think it has multiple facets to it. Just like how we're in the trenches right now with our children. Mine, Alex and I both have 4-year-olds. I also have a 2-year-old, and often would meet people who have had grown-up children. They'll say, "Oh, so I cannot tell you how many times people stop me and say, 'Oh, you're so lucky. This is the
Enjoy
best
every
years.'"
moment.
And I'm like, these are the best years. Oh, I wish mine was small again. I'm thinking, no, you don't understand. Like, I haven't even drank water properly in like a month or two. Like, I
You
don't
do
know what.
understand, but it's like any trauma,
Yes,
you forget about it.
exactly. So I definitely think, I don't know. We have this experience of always like, there's so many sides to it, right? There's so many
Yeah.
sides, so many perspectives. But I also think children give us wisdom. Sometimes I think
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
not just raising my children, they're raising me because they say things that I've never thought about before. And I'll think, wow, that is so remarkable, but you're so little,
Yeah.
but you can come up with things. And I think it sounds as if for you, your grandson's really allowing you to open your eyes even further to maybe like
Yeah.
outside
I
to
mean,
exclude people or just, yeah.
through my work, it's citizens' advice, I would have considered myself to have been a very empathetic person, somebody who was very inclusive and very understanding. But the truth is, I know now that I wasn't, and I know that because of my grandson, and I know that because of the experiences that we have when we are out together, and the judgment and the stigma that is heaped upon us by people that should know better. It's very difficult being out in public spaces with a child who appears normal, and I hate that word. I think, yeah, it's a horrible way to describe a child, and that child is not behaving in a way that you might expect. So I realise now that he's taught me a great deal about what it means to truly love, to be inclusive, to be part of a community, to be welcoming, to be warm. And I hope that I was already starting from a relatively high bar, but he's taught me a great deal.
Yeah, I'll share this experience I had a few months ago. Because again, I think for me as well as a mum, what I now see is other mothers that need help, which I never saw before I had kids. Like if I saw someone get on the train before, I don't think it would, unless it definitely looked like they needed help. I don't think I would go, "Oh, can I help you?" But now I would always ask. And I remember I was dropping my son off to school, and there's a school around the corner, and I'd always see this woman. She has an older son, maybe 10, and they'd always be fighting to get into school, like physically fighting. He's quite a big lad as well. So, and in one time I just couldn't walk past her. Like everyone was like around, but nobody kind of interfered or anything. She was crying, she was pushing him, like physically trying to get him into school, but he wasn't having it. And I thought, she's probably trying to get to work, or she's just desperate to get him in. And I just couldn't walk away. It was as if my feet was like glued to the ground. And I just went back and I said, "Look, I don't know if this helps, but I'm just going to hang around. And if you need my help, I'd love to do something." And before you know it, I was just making jokes with him saying, "Oh, I love your hair." And, I don't know, we just had this weird kind of conversation. I can't even explain what we spoke about. And I said, "Oh, it's hard, isn't it?" And I said, "Oh, I imagine you spend all your money." And him like, "I spend all my money on my kids. I haven't spent it on myself. Look at my outfit." And we just kind of connected. She couldn't have been more different from me, But in that moment, we end up even having a cuddle, and and eventually, she managed to get him back into the car. And I remember just thinking, that's what being a mom does to you. It just opens your eyes and mind into this, just another person struggling that I never would have thought or understood before. I might have walked away and thought, "Oh, she'll figure it out somehow, right?" But yeah, I think
What a
it's such a
difference that
blessing.
will have made to her day
Yeah.
as well. I mean, I can deal with the haters, believe me. I can deal
Mm.
with them. It's like, but it leaves me feeling really upset afterwards. And despite the fact that I'm saying to you that I can deal with it, I'll be honest with you, the overriding feeling that I have is shame, and I haven't quite worked out why that is. It's something, it's mixed up somehow with my own feelings about parenting and how I always want to, I talked about when I do something, I really want to do a good job of it, and what it means to be a good parent and how you present as a good parent. So it's mixed up in all of that, and I haven't quite worked out what's going on there. But despite the fact that I can deal with it in the moment, afterwards there's always a feeling of shame and frustration and upset. But the people that really sort of make the difference are the ones that are kind, and they're the ones that will bring me to tears. And it's simple things like just showing him a kindness, accepting when he's maybe done something that is not great to them, because sometimes he can do that, responding with kindness. They're the things that really make a difference.
And what would you say to the people who are sort of, I guess, judgmental or make you feel, I don't know, like unwelcome when you're out in public, I guess? Like what would you say to them if you were able to? Because I think people would be listening who maybe have been in that position of being the judgmental person, and like I think understanding what we could do differently to support people would be helpful as well.
So I think what I want for my grandson is no different to what they want for their children. I want him to be able to go out into the world. I want him to be able to have social experiences. I want him to be able to have a place. Now, it's a different type of experience for him, but I still want him to have it in the same way. We have had an experience on holiday where somebody said to my daughter, "Why have you brought a child like that here? You do realise he's spoiling it for everyone else."
Wow.
And her response was, "What do you want me to do? Keep him in a cupboard? Like, he has every right to be outside." She wants the same for him as you want for your child. I know it's hard, and I know he's noisy, and I know he can be disruptive and all of those things, but he still deserves a place in the world. And it's only 10, 20, 30 minutes of your life. It's every minute of every day for us.
Yeah.
Just suck it up. Smile at the person who's with the child. Give them permission to be there.
It's
And
what
just a small bit of your day. It's every minute of every day for us.
I'm just so shocked that somebody would actually say that.
Wow.
It's not unusual. I could give you a list of other experiences that we've had like that, but then I can also tell you a lovely experience that that happened as well. So on another different holiday, bearing in mind my daughter's traveling as a solo traveler with a child with really significant needs. I mean, I think that's a massively brave thing to do, and I'm not sure that I could have done that. So she's already giving a huge amount. She was in a restaurant, and a Dutch couple were looking over when my grandson was in the restaurant. He was making a lot of noise. There was food flying about. It was really difficult. And she was getting herself really upset, thinking that they were judging, and was really worried about the impact that them being in the restaurant was having on other people. But when she got up to go and pay her bill, that couple had paid her bill and left her a note to say, "You are amazing."
Oh,
Oh,
wow.
that's really nice.
Wow.
So there are good people out there, and you've got to remember that. But actually, day to day, the stigma and the judgment and the hate that we experience when we're out, it's pretty profound.
Wow.
It's just shocking. It really is. I think it's easy to think that society's kind of moved on because people are more familiar with neurodiversity and stuff like that now. Yeah, I think things certainly have moved on since the 1980s, 1990s. But so I think if you're not in that space, then it's easy to think that, oh, well, we must have moved on past that.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
So
Tiffany, just spending time with that mum at the school gates and helping her with that child, you've got no idea the impact that will have had. There'll be somebody that she is telling that story to.
Yes.
I can guarantee.
Yeah. Yeah, it really touched me. I remember just getting home and just really thinking about it. And I thought, wow, I felt I was privileged to be there and to have just given us something for 5 minutes.
Parents and grandparents of, neurodiverse children or any child with any limiting disability or illness, they want exactly the same for their children as others do. So just give them that opportunity.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Alison.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Because I think, it's the kind of thing that unless you experience, you don't know, and you don't really know how best to then support people. So thank you.
Let's talk about podcasting, because right now you're on the other side of it, right? How does it feel, by the way, to be like podcast pitch? That's a word. How does it feel to be on the other side of the mic?
It'll be no surprise to you that I love chatting to people. I really love people. So I'm quite happy on either side of the mic, actually. I've had to do a lot less work to prepare for this one than I do when I'm on the other side of the mic. So in that regard, it's a lot nicer. Yeah, I don't think people realise sort of how much work's involved in actually. I certainly didn't when I started podcasting. I just thought, I'll just rock up and I'll have a nice conversation.
I mean, for me, the conversation is still the bit I really love about doing this. And I feel like, I like chatting to people. I'm also quite nosy, so I'm pretty comfortable with asking people questions about their life and asking more. But yes, there is a lot of prep that goes into it.
Yeah.
And tell us a bit about your podcast as well.
Yeah, so my podcast is called This is the North, and it is a vehicle to encourage good quality conversation about the fact that there are disparities in health, wealth and opportunity between the North and the South of England. So it might surprise your listeners to know that if you are born into poor circumstances, you could die as much as 12 or 13 years younger than if you were born into a wealthier family. So in the borough where I work, there is a 13-year life expectancy.
It's the borough I live in, so
difference. And these wards are literally like 2 miles apart. So we're talking about a disparity in life expectancy of up to 13 years just because you're born in a poor place. And when we think about outcomes for people in the South, generally they live longer, they're in better health towards the end of their life, they earn more money, their educational attainment is higher, there's more funding available for businesses in the South. There's a whole load of disparities in health, wealth, opportunity. So it was about bringing that to life for listeners, but also highlighting some of the great things that happen in the North of England. We've got some fantastic people, we've got great arts, culture, heritage. So it's not all doom and gloom, but there is some doom and gloom, I'm going to be honest, because, we've been through We've been through a property crash, we've been through welfare reform, we've had austerity, we've had COVID, we've got cost of living crisis. These things have caused all sorts of social issues. Our children are leaving school ill-equipped often for life. That has implications which go beyond the things that we might imagine.
Actually, as well, one of the reasons that we were focused on ambition as a topic for Mambition, when we first started talking about this, we were talking about that sometimes in the Northeast, because of all of these factors that you're talking about, there can be a poverty of ambition, that people feel like they don't deserve to strive for things. And it was one of the reasons that we're sort of bucking the trend in having a podcast about motherhood and ambition at the same time, but it being from the Northeast. And we want to speak to distinct voices from the Northeast who are challenging those notions about what ambitions we can have coming from here.
Oh, that you're absolutely right. I mean, the words mother and ambition are often seen as sort of, never to be seen together.
Oxymorons, yeah.
Yeah. But, you can absolutely be ambitious and successful and be a mother and, all of those things. But it is much harder in the north of England than perhaps it is in the south. Bring that to life for you. Of course, there is poverty in the south of England. There are some wards in London where there are more children per capita on free school meals than in some areas of the northeast of England, and those areas are significantly impoverished. But generally speaking, those children will still go on to do better than children in the northeast. And the reason being is they are surrounded by aspiration. They're
Yes.
in the middle of London. They have
Yeah.
all of the culture, the arts, the heritage, the financial centre. They're seeing life passing them by. They've got this sort of, privileged position of seeing all of this ambition around them. So generally speaking, although their start might even have been worse than ours, their life outcomes are better. Because
And I guess they're kind of surrounded by that like hustle culture as well, of like striving, and it's the ambition that is sometimes lacking here, that people just feel like it's not for people like us.
Yeah.
Sorry, Tiffany, go on.
No, it's okay, I was going to say, I think you're right as well, because I think it's what you said about, because London is in pockets. In 5 minutes in London, you can go from like quite a impoverished area to a very wealthy area. I mean, I remember in London, what you'd be walking down, I don't know, Bond Street, and you'd be seeing homeless people, so it's such a contrast. But what that offers is an opportunity to see something that could inspire you. I will never forget, there's a boy called Reggie Nelson. I don't remember if you know him from pre-pandemic. It kind of went viral. It was this boy who'd lost his dad, and he'd been growing up in, I think, a single home and had a very difficult childhood. And one day he said he found himself in central London, just feeling like he'd had enough. And he went and knocked on a door that looked to be very wealthy. And he said, "I'm really sorry to be at your door, but I was walking past and I thought your house and I thought it was remarkable. And I'd love to ask you, how did you get to where you are today?" And lo and behold, the person opened the door and said, "Come in." And he ended up being a banker. And he said, he just took a chance and I'll chat to you. This is what I've done. And he actually ended up getting an internship through this guy.
Wow.
And he ended up then becoming an advocate for people to say that, that obviously I took a chance, and because I was in the area and I just had enough of life and it was my only option. But I think that's what makes London amazing. And at the same time, I don't know if you remember, there was a time when people used to carry their CVs around central London as well. And so I think it's the idea that someone could take a chance on you. You could go on a train with someone who was a CEO of a company. You could say, "Oh, can you help me?" So I think London does have that option just because of the pockets. But
the streets are paved with gold. You never know who you're going to speak to.
I mean, it is. I mean, I've been in a pub, years ago, where we end up meeting the CEO of like Domino's. I mean, we end up having a drink with him. And what are the chances, right? But that is the sort of chance meetings you can have in London that could change your life, regardless of where you're coming from. I think that's lacking.
It's not to underestimate the challenges that individuals might be experiencing, but generally, if we look at the macro, if you are born into deprived circumstances in the south of England, the likelihood of you being able to pull yourself up are higher than if you're in the north. So it's shining a spotlight on some of these conversations, but also celebrating some of the great people and places that we have here as well. And I've really enjoyed doing it. We're about 35 episodes in now, and we've spoken to all sorts of different people. We've covered topics like the housing crisis, the rise in suicide, but we've also spoken to Anne Cleves, who's the famous Northeast author of Vera. We've spoken to Lord Harrington about his recent report on investments. We've spoken to disability activists and sports people. So it's a broad church of conversation, but the focus is the north and the people of the north.
But it's interesting because it's weird. I mean, I grew up in London, but I think I definitely have that. I don't know if I think it comes from my sort of immigrant kind of environment growing up. Like, we were given this idea that we came to this country. My parents came to this country, and because of that, they built a foundation that I can carry on. So I've always had that, even though we didn't have a lot growing up, we were given this kind of mentality that you can do anything. Like, you will take the struggle that we've sort of, we've deposited, and you can make something out of it. And it's interesting because I actually love living in the Northeast, even though I've come from London. Actually, when I go back to London, I'm like, no, I prefer the Northeast. And I actually see opportunities, but I think it's because of that early kind of years I have. So sad now of the people of today, because they don't have the opportunity for someone to speak life into them or give them a glimpse of possibilities. It's sad how you can, do you see what I mean? Like how your perspective can be different in that way. Yeah.
If we think about our role as mothers as well, the language that we use when we're talking to our children is so important. So I was talking to somebody who's really involved in encouraging women and girls into STEM. And one of the things as women that we say a lot is, oh, I'm not good at maths, that's not for me.
Right.
Or I'm not good at IT, that's not for me. And when we say those things in the earshot of our children, particularly, our young girls, we're telling them that there's not much chance that they're going to be good at maths. There's not much chance that they're going to be at STEM, that's not a career that girls do. So we also need to be really careful that we're setting the right tone in our homes, So again, product of the time. But when I've got two brothers, my brothers used to do things like take the bins out and fix the bikes and do the cars. I used to do things like set the table and wash the dishes. And I'm not being critical of my parents. That was absolutely how things were done. My parents have taught me so much about hard work, about truth, about doing the right thing. But the standards and the expectations that we set as parents in the home, it's really important, that stuff.
Yeah, I often think about like how we can sort of take what you said there about the North and the South divide, and how can we place it into the hands of parents who are listening, right? Mothers, like how can you take your child from where they are today? How can you sort of guide them through life so that, so they can be the best versions of themselves? And I always think it's, I don't know, like there's so like, for example, I recently signed my son up to Scouts, but I think there are maybe things like extracurricular activities, perhaps reading to them. Do you have an advice on? Do you see what I mean?
I was really hoping that question wasn't coming to me.
I will just say, Alison, we were very, very clear when we started this podcast that we were not setting ourselves up to be like parenting experts.
Yeah.
So feel free to pass that book.
Oh, no, don't pass it. No, Alison's coming to you. No, because I just think, look, I think, I know there's this, sometimes, like you said, there are bigger constraints on people. I don't dismiss that, but I'd love to hear, our audience, like mothers, right? They're listening and they're thinking, okay, like I want to, I don't know, give the best out for my children. Are there any advice that you could see that maybe things we can do on a day-to-day basis, like just to,
I can't.
Okay.
I don't profess to be any expert, but the things that have made the biggest difference to me as a human from my childhood all the way through to adulthood, and the thing that I offered my children when they were little, it's books. It's reading, it's being curious, it's not accepting everything you heard that's told to you as truth. Because if you can think critically, if you can understand what somebody seeks, might benefit from providing a narrative, if you can question the things that are around you, if you can let a book take you away to a different place when you're maybe on in periods of stress, like reading books, learning, being curious, that's ultimately what's given me the opportunity to have what is now 3 different careers, and all of the opportunities to do all the voluntary stuff that I do, and it's the thing that I share with my grandson. So I can't offer a panacea to all families out there, but for me, literature has been the one constant. It's the thing that I shared with my mother and my grandmother. It's the thing that I've shared with my children, and it's the thing that I share with my grandson. And for me, it just takes me out of my life and gives me so much relief. It gives me learning. It gives me peace. It shows me different perspectives. And if you can read often, you can write well as well. So it's a virtuous circle of benefit.
I love that.
I was just going to say that in terms of, you were talking about the kind of the way that you can challenge the way children are brought up, I guess, as well, to like challenge stereotypes and challenge that kind of thing. And I guess that obviously that's been, it sounds like that's been important to you in your career as well, that you were willing to, put yourself out of your comfort zone, to have ambition, to push yourself forward when maybe those, your first career was one that probably seemed to all your family like, how on earth is Alison going to go off and do this?
Yeah.
But you've challenged that expectation, you've done it, and you talked about those, I guess, those slightly gendered roles in the home. So I guess I'm getting into the, like, what are those things that you think as people in the Northeast we could be doing to kind of push ourselves out into, I guess, slightly more ambitious roles? How do we challenge that kind of poverty of ambition, I guess? And then if that is something we can do for ourselves, then how do we drive that forward for our kids?
One of the things that I work really hard to do is to make sure that I always lift other women up. So I have been very fortunate in my life that I have had strong female role models who have given me a hand up. But I've also come across women who have been very, very willing and happy to keep me down as well. So don't be one of those. Be conscious that the women around you are watching you. There is somebody who is watching you who is aspiring to be you, actually. So be mindful of that. Surround yourself with people who you aspire to be. So that's a tactic that I've used throughout my working life, actually. I've always aspired to connect with women who I respected, who I really wanted to be like, and I've learned from them. But be that person for somebody else as well, because as women, I do want to acknowledge that men are also having a tough time at the moment. Men and boys are also having a tough time. So this is not a them and us conversation. But you're here to talk to me about what it's like to be a mum and what it's like to be a female entrepreneur and to be a female leader. So that's what I'm going to focus on. But as women, we've got to be responsive to one another. The power of sisterhood is something which has been a constant throughout my life. I don't have a huge number of girlfriends, but the girlfriends that I do have are very precious to me. They've been with me on this journey of life always. But the reason that they are my friends and the reason why we've stuck with one another is because we're really honest with one another. We're challenging of one another. They will tell me if they think that I'm wrong. They'll support me. Don't get me wrong, even if they know that I'm wrong. But that challenge, that you've got to be able to accept it as well as give it, I suppose, as well. That's another thing. So being mindful of the women that are around you and giving them a hand up, seeking out women who you aspire to be and learning from them, respecting them and learning from them, but also, giving and receiving challenge, thinking about the information that you're absorbing and who seeks to benefit from it is something else which is really important, and just not accepting everything that you are told. And it's very easy to say that when I'm sort of edging towards the end of my career, but actually, it's much easier at 55 to be disruptive and a little bit awkward than it was at 30. I mean, that is a truth.
No, I definitely get that. I think for women, most of the time, I think confidence comes with age. I'm definitely at my, I don't care, era of life, and I'm sort of like, less apologetic, and it's nice.
Yeah. So I think the role of sisterhood's been a consistent theme throughout my career, actually. I've mentioned my mother and how curious she is. She's always learning new things. That's been important. My grandmother was the same. And I've come across some fantastic women over the years.
And I'd just be interested in your perspective on, like, having different careers and like how you look back at that now, of those pockets of different career. And because I think one of the things we've come across is that women's careers are not normally just linear, that they are in different, different eras, cycles, whatever. And what advice would you give people about that? Because I think sometimes we have a period in motherhood where you have to take a bit of a step back, with the benefit of hindsight of having those different periods of careers. Is there any advice you'd give people about that?
I mean, both times it felt like starting again. So, one thing we haven't talked about is I'm sort of in a third career at the moment, because I'm also working in the public sector, but we haven't got time to go there. But each time you make a move, it can feel like a step back initially, and that can be really hard. And it can also be a step back financially as well. Let's not pull any punches about that. And that can be hard. I mean, when I reflect back now on the private practice element of my life, and to be fair, the thing that stopped me doing something different was money. And it wasn't until I sort of had the third child, went on maternity leave and was only paid statutory maternity pay and actually survived, that I had the courage to do something different. So we get by, and it can feel like a step back, but it's only a moment in time. There's more to come, and you just build out from there, really. And each time it's worked out for me. I've been very fortunate. And, we do also have to acknowledge that there's an element of luck in all of this as well. I get really frustrated when I hear people say, I've got all of this because I worked hard.
Yeah.
Oh, come on. I know you worked hard, but actually so is the mother who's managing 3 kids, who's also got like 2 cleaning jobs. She's working incredibly hard. There's an element of luck in the trajectory that we take as well, so we mustn't underestimate that. I've been very lucky that I've come across some great people. They've liked me, they've nurtured me, they've developed me, they've given me opportunities. And yes, of course I've worked hard, of course I have. It would be madness to say otherwise, but there's an element of luck in there. And your life partner makes a big difference as well. Who you choose as a life partner is really important. My husband has always taken his share of the burden of running the home, supporting the family, all of those things. And I think that's made a big difference as well. I couldn't work the hours that I do and do the many, many things that I do if I was doing 75% or more of the looking after the home. I've completely lost sight of your original question now.
No, but the answer's been...
I've lost sight of my question as well. It's my ADHD. You gave me the bit that I was interested in about, bits of career and I like the advice for women. You answered that bit lovely. So my ADHD was satisfied there.
There's always a moment where it feels like a step back, and that can be hard and that can affect our confidence, but it always grows back into something fantastic, and it might be different. That's okay.
Yeah. Alison, we could talk to you forever, but I think I think there's so much to sort of break down there. But yeah, I think it's been such a great conversation. Where can people find you online?
Yeah, so I've got a website which is just very easily alisondunn.co.uk, and of course they can look up the podcast, which is called This Is the North, which is available on all of the usual platforms. And if they want to connect with me, you'll find me on LinkedIn very easily as well.
Great. Thanks, everybody. It's been a really interesting episode. As usual, I'm going to do the podcasty bit of, can you all please like and subscribe, leave us 5-star reviews. We only want 5-star reviews. And, head over and find Alison's podcast as well. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, guys.
Subscribe. These ladies are working hard.
Yes, Alison. See you guys in the next one.
Thanks, everybody.